This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
Greetings and welcome to Supreme Master Television. Today we're visiting with Dr. William Harris. He currently resides in Hawaii. He's here in California sharing some time with us. Thank you, Bill.
My pleasure, David.
When did you begin working as a medical doctor and what were some of your experiences?
Well, I graduated from the University of California Medical School, which is about 5 blocks of that away, in 1963. And then I worked as an emergency room doc in what was then the Los Angeles County Hospital. And then I moved out to Hawaii and worked 35 years for the Kaiser Permanente medical group, which is basically Kaiser Hospital.
And currently then you're not still working as a doctor?
I'm retired.
Retired, okay.
The last couple of years as a physician for Kaiser, I ran a volunteer vegetarian lifestyle clinic. Take a few patients who were willing to listen and try to make changes and teach them how to be successful vegetarians. And by doing that, getting off many of their medications. Thanks for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure to represent the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii in front of the Vegetarian Society of San Francisco. This is our logo. You can get a shirt that has this design on it. Our newsletters are archived at this web address here, vsh.org, and we have 70 of our previous speakers online at vsh.org. You can watch speakers like John McDougall and Caldwell Esselstyn, T.C. Campbell, and many, many others. Very important workers in the area of vegan nutrition and information. I have a website of my own, which is vegsource.com/Harris. You can read my entire book on that line as a PDF file. I also have a downloadable spreadsheet of the United States Department of Agriculture SR71 nutrient database. There's 6,200 foods in it and 171 nutrients. Now, I've got some words of advice that'll be straightforward. First of all, if it doesn't have fiber in it, don't eat it. Okay? All these animal foods have no fiber because animals cannot synthesize cellulase, which is the main component of fiber. And refined sugar and vegetable oil also have no fiber because they're either 100% sugar or 100% fat. But any of these other foods in their whole state are perfectly okay, including such things as avocados and nuts, which a lot of vegan authors will tell you should never, never, never eat. Here's another bit of advice. If man made it, don't eat it. That's probably the most important piece of advice I have here. And the reason is because the food industry is driven by addiction. Ask yourself, why do people go into the food biz?
Make money.
To make money, exactly, yeah. They do it by exploiting the most addictive of all substances, fat, as in this hamburger, and sugar, as in this milkshake, and salt, as in the French fries. And when you sort out the ingredients of a Big Mac attack, it turns out if this is the RDA arrow, everybody understand RDA, required daily allowance? Everything on the left of this arrow is deficient. If you eat nothing but this milkshake, the hamburger, and the French fries, you're going to be missing alpha-tocopherol, which is vitamin E, vitamin A, which is actually beta-carotene, magnesium, riboflavin, pyridoxine, zinc, vitamin C, dietary fiber, and folate. Just barely make it on iron, believe it or not, in spite of the fact of the hamburger. Everything on the right is okay, but you know, you're deficient in all that other stuff. So when you finish going through all this, you have a lot of very elegant biochemical sensors in your body that are going to tell you, hey, we're still missing all this other stuff, so you've got to eat some more. And so the ideal formula for getting overweight is to eat stuff like this. This is a typical label, and here is the fat, partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, which translates to trans fat. Here's the sugar, and sugar again, and then there's the salt, and you can find all of these things repeated several places. Fiber is a nutritional traffic cop. It shortens your intestinal transit time, and that's why vegans don't usually have to worry about constipation. But it also retards the intestinal absorption of both nutrients, things that you do need, but more importantly, things that you don't want, like saturated fat and cholesterol. It sort of screens those things out. Now, the reason a vegan diet causes weight loss is because vegans, to be properly nourished, have to eat about 1/3 more food by weight and volume than omnivores in order to meet calorie requirements. And your stomach has a maximum capacity of about 1 liter. So what happens is that you fill your stomach and you meet your nutrient requirements before you meet your calorie requirements. And so you're short on calories, you've met all of your nutrient needs, you filled your stomach, and you take the needed calories out of your fat stores, and that's how you lose weight on a vegan diet. And here's Joel Furman, a very knowledgeable guy. Now, this is his illustration. You can fill your entire stomach with 400 calories of leafy greens, carrots, onions, and good healthy stuff. Or you can fill it with 400 calories of chicken. You still have all this volume left to go. Or you can put 400 calories of oil in it. And there's lots and lots of room left. Now, in my opinion, a vegan diet and exercise are the prime determinants of health, way ahead of all of the medical and surgical treatments that are possible. Exercise is not negotiable. In my opinion, the only excuse for not exercising every day is a death certificate that's at least 24 hours old. And I recommend that everybody have 3 exercises that they can depend on. Running is probably the best, but sooner or later, you get an overuse injury. So then it's the time to start swimming or riding a bike. And I also think that learning how to fast is a good idea. I do all of these things. I swim and run upstairs and ride a bike every day, but my favorite activity is somewhat different. I'm kind of a gymnast. That's a rope climb. That's a good upper body workout. And this is my best exercise. This is acrobatic trampoline. That's me, yeah. That's a triple twisting back quad. Now, nothing organizes the mind quite as well as falling through space at 140 miles an hour. And this is my latest skydive, which was on the 6th of April. And the background, this is what the landing looks like from my viewpoint. That's taken by my camera helmet. That was a hook turn, and here's the hook turn taken by Georgie from the ground. It looks like that. And the guy that just landed is the world's best skydiving cameraman.
Would you say daily exercise is important?
Oh, absolutely. Daily exercise has got to be, you have to become addicted to daily exercise. You have to get to the point where if you don't exercise every day, you have failed your duty to the gods. Really, it has to be that fanatical. And it doesn't have to be Olympic caliber exercise, but something. Because your body depends on circulation. And if you don't cycle your circulation every day, why, nothing will heal. You have to be able to get the blood around to the damaged parts to replace the damaged parts with new nutrients and carry away the waste? And the answer is 1,027. Actually, it's 1,035 as of the 6th of April. Okay. Yeah, well, it was a lot of fun. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it. Now, the reason a vegan diet works is because all of the essential minerals were synthesized only by nuclear fusion processes that took place at least 5 billion years ago. Okay? All the essential minerals were made by nuclear fusion. And all of the essential organic nutrients, which are the carbon compounds that we are made of and that our food is made of, are synthesized by plants and microorganisms only, meaning bacteria mostly. And none of them are synthesized by animals. All of the essential organic nutrients begin with the photosynthesis of glucose, which looks like this. The sun sends its rays down, the plant catches the rays, it grabs all of these inorganic nutrients out of the environment, and it first makes glucose, which is sugar. And from there, it makes the 10 essential amino acids and the 2 essential fatty acids, all of the true vitamins, plus all of the phytonutrients, which are the antioxidants that we're just starting to learn about. Now, if we were cats, I couldn't say this, because cats require these things: arachidonic acid, carnitine, DHA, EPA, retinol, and taurine, and those things are found only in animal food. So if you're going to make a vegan out of your kitty cat, you better make sure that you're getting special veggie cat or some similar well-balanced cat food, because cats require these 4 nutrients, and they may have a couple of others that I don't know about, but we're not cats, obviously. The cats have been on our carnivorous track as long as there have been cats, but we are the descendants of large arboreal primate vegetarians. So there's a quadruple whammy in animal foods. First of all the essential nutrients are secondhand. 2, the unique ingredients, namely cholesterol, saturated fat, and the third one, autoimmunogenic proteins, are all harmful. They contain no protective phytonutrients. Animals make none of the phytonutrients, or almost none, and they displace from the diet all of the plant foods that do make these things. Anybody want to ask what protein is? This is usually the first thing that comes up when a vegetarian tries to explain things. There's hundreds of amino acids in nature, and you can make more in the laboratory, and there's only 35 in the human body. Of those 35, only 20 of them are involved in protein metabolism. This is a typical amino acid here. It's got a carboxyl group and an amine group over here, and this is a polymer. We make all kinds of clothing and goods out of polymers using the same molecule repetitively, tacked together by chemical bonds, but a copolymer is slightly different. It's similar, but not identical molecules held together by chemical bonds, and that's what protein is. All of the essential protein amino acids are manufactured only by plants, these green ones over on the left, and there's an evolutionary reason for this. It takes an average of 5.9 enzymes to put these essential aminos together, whereas it only takes about 1.5 amino acids to put the non-essentials together. Those are the ones that you can make yourself. You don't have to eat those. So if you are an organism that is subjected to Darwinian evolution, and you continue to make the things that you're already getting in your diet, you will be at a selective disadvantage and you drop out of the gene pool. Vitamins are the same way. All the true vitamins are made only by plants. You probably know all about this. Which vitamins do I take? I take all of them. Yeah, in the food that I eat. I'm kind of iffy on this. I have no objection to people taking a multivitamin. The one vitamin that you have to take if you're a vegan is, let's hear it loud and clear. You got it, yeah, you got to have B12. And I am a living example of somebody that tried to get away without using it. I got a B12 deficiency when I was about 3 years into being a vegan. So I don't want anybody else to go through that. Make sure you have a dependable B12. The classic B12 deficiency is called pernicious anemia. And that is characterized by very large blood cells, red blood cells, but not many of them. George Bernard Shaw was the first guy to find out about this. And he had to take liver shots in the waning years of his life. He died at 94, so he didn't do too bad in spite of being B12 deficient. But his fellow British vegetarians gave him a bad time because he'd broken the vows and he was using liver shots. He wasn't supposed to be doing that. But he said, I'd rather be a live coward than a dead hero. Yeah.
I didn't see D up there. Recently, a doctor told me I had a D deficiency.
Okay, good question. How about vitamin D? And the reason I don't put it in on the list is that it is not a vitamin. Okay, it is in fact a hormone. And the proper way to get your so-called D, quote unquote, is to get out in the sun, because your body synthesizes D from cholesterol. You take a molecule of cholesterol and then you move it up to the skin. But what happens is ultraviolet light at a certain wavelength, about 300 nanometers, I think, comes in and opens up the B ring and it turns it into the so-called D. Now, if you are a person of dark skin and you're living in a northern climate, and I would class San Francisco as a northern climate, since I'm from Hawaii, you may need to take this stuff. However, the reason that D got in the papers the first time because D deficiency was causing rickets. And I searched the Hawaii Medical Journal back to 1885, the first inaugural issue, and nobody has ever reported rickets in Hawaii. But if you are living in a northern climate and you have a pigmented skin, you're going to have to think about getting a source of D. And there's been a huge fuss made over this recently. There's a lot of reasons to believe that D is important in preventing cancer. It has many other, well, of course, it's a bone strengthener. We know that. But there's also a flip side of it. And the flip side is that if you get too much of this stuff, it's toxic. And one of the toxic properties of vitamin D is that it causes ectopic calcification, which means that parts of your body that are not supposed to be calcified get calcified. Now, there wouldn't be any problem there, except that we don't know what causes ectopic calcification. And therefore, I think it's, before you take vitamin D, regard it as something that you want to consult your physician about. Okay? Yeah, you can get a vitamin D assay done quite simply if you just ask your doc for it. And if it shows out that it's low, then yes.
Too much vitamin D cause calcification of glands in your brain?
Yes. The way we found out about this is we overfed this stuff to rats. And they get what's called Muckeberg's medial calcification, which is all your pipes show up on the x-ray because they're calcified. It's not a symptomatic problem, but it does show up on x-ray, and it shouldn't. Lady back here? Thank you. I told you what the god-awful symptoms were of B12 deficiency, but the early symptoms are psychological, and it has now been established that you can develop mental illness, schizophrenia, paranoia, and in my case, it was just a profound sense that something was wrong. And fortunately, I had been to the International Vegetarian Union in 1957 when I heard the early reports of B12 deficiency in vegans. And having that information at hand really helped, because I could have gone to all the doctors in San Francisco and they never would have spotted it. But I asked for a vitamin B12 assay, and it turned out that I was under 90 picograms per milliliter, which is in the B12 deficient range. So I stocked up. In the advanced stages, you not only have this anemia, which you may not be aware of unless you get a lab test, but if you put a tuning fork on your, well, say one of the bones of your ankle, you won't be able to feel a vibration. You lose your vibratory sense because it wipes out one of the posterior tracts of the spinal cord. Question back there? Too much B12? There ain't no such animal. I know I've taken as much as 1,000 micrograms of B12 daily for prolonged periods of time. And the reason I don't believe it can ever be toxic is because it requires a very special transport system. You swallow B12, and it's picked up by something called intrinsic factor in the stomach. And the intrinsic factor binds to the B12, and then it moves down the gut, and then it locks onto a receptor site on the gut, which then moves it into the bloodstream, where it picks up another transport molecule, which is called transcobalamin, and that finally moves it around to the liver, and then it gets used by whatever it needs to use it. I think.
Is the B12 capsule vegan? And what do you think about injecting B12?
Injecting B12 is the ideal way to treat B12 deficiency if and when you get it. And I will tell you that in my days of medical practice, a lot of the little old country doctors used to give patients shots of B12 because it worked as a beautiful placebo. It's the perfect placebo. It's a little vial of red liquid. You stick it in the arm, it hurts a little bit. You give the shot, and about a week later, the patient comes back and asks you for another one. And I kept thinking, well, why is that? This guy's not B12 deficient. But now emerging literature is showing that almost everybody can use a little extra B12. A lot, especially older people, because that complicated absorption mechanism that I told you about starts to fail when you get into your 50s and 60s. Question?
Yeah, on the vitamin D, if you're not getting any sun, you're going to be deficient in vitamin D because you can't get enough from the food because how much vegetables you eat. And they recommend 400 units, and if you're deficient, the doctors give you 50,000 units to bring it up. I'm just wondering, what do you cause? I haven't heard of any excess vitamin D causing problems. How would you know if you have the excess? Because I'm thinking 5,000 units a day.
You're probably okay at 5,000. I'd be a little nervous at 50,000.
The test you give, is there I take the test. Is there an upper limit of 80 or?
I think the limit is about 30 to 50. And by all means, if you're concerned about quote-unquote vitamin D, there's a guy named Michael Hollick back east who's an MD, he's a dermatologist, and he is pumping vitamin D like crazy. Yeah, everybody's saying take vitamin D, and I'm the guy that's going to say, well, in the first place, it's not a vitamin, and secondly, it's toxic in overdose, and thirdly, the toxicity that it's likely to take is ectopic calcification, and we don't know the cause of ectopic calcification. I've been looking for an explanation for monkeyberg's medial sclerosis for the last 15 years. Nobody knows what causes it, but it may be that we're just taking too much D. Now, I will give you a cute trick here. If you're worried that you're not getting enough D, develop a taste for mushrooms. Take your mushroom, pull out that little stem, and put it up out in the sun, gill side up. the last USDA database listed shiitake mushrooms as number 2 in vitamin D content, right below cod liver oil, which is, if there are any people in this room besides me old enough to remember cod liver oil, you will remember that it didn't taste very good. And cod liver oil comes in at 10,000 international units of vitamin D per 100 grams. And shiitake mushrooms come in at 1,400. That's number 2 on the list. Now, the latest USDA database doesn't heap all that much praise on shiitakes, but any mushroom, or a lot of different mushrooms, button mushrooms will make D if you turn them belly up. Guy in the back, digestive enzymes. Well, you brought up a whole topic in itself. I'll mention it, maybe I'll go back over it. Digestive problems are frequently a major problem for vegans, and the reason is that there's so bloody much fiber in a vegan diet. And I've already told you that you shouldn't eat anything that doesn't have fiber. So your next question is, well, how am I going to digest that fiber because I don't have any cellulase? And cellulase is the stuff that breaks down fiber. We lack that enzyme because it's a very slow-acting enzyme. It splits off glucose molecules from alternate ends of a very complicated cellulose molecule, and it's very slow, and that's probably why we don't have it. The food would be in and out of our gut before the cellulase could do anything. Now, cows are ruminant animals. They have cellulase elaborating bacteria in their rumen, and so they're able to chew their cud and take care of the fiber and get at all the nutrients. As far as particular digestive enzymes that you might try, Beano, I'm sure you've all heard of Beano. It may reduce the flatus content of beans. There's something else called Yes to Beans, which also works pretty well. But the very best solution to this problem is to chew your food very well. Exotic recipes here. Here's a really exotic one. This is called a salad. There's nothing in this except tomatoes, cucumbers, and some leafy green stuff. And this is the nutrient value of that salad. This is the RDA arrow running along here. And with the exception of vitamin B12, this salad has got 100% or more of the RDA for every one of these 17 nutrients. This would look even better if it didn't have so much vitamin C, because the vitamin C is dragging the whole graph this direction. But you've got enough of everything except the B12. You can fix that by making a dressing and putting some Red Star nutritional yeast in it, which has B12. Now here's a contrasting recipe. This is a Betty Crocker sour cream chocolate cake. And this is a typical home economics recipe, 2 cups of self-rising flour, blah-de-blah. And it looks like that, and of course everybody is starting to salivate just looking at it, but this is what it's got. Everything to the left of this RDA arrow is deficient. So you're going to eat this cake, and then you're going to think, well, your brain is going to think, where are the nutrients? I got to eat some more. And that's how you wind up getting fat on a typical American diet. How do you break down the fiber? Beano and Yes to Beans. You could try Lactopriv B, which is a probiotic. It's vegan. It's got Lactobacillus bifidus in it, which is a normal inhabitant of the neonatal gut.
What is your recommendation for B12 supplementation?
Well, I would take either a B12 tablet, which you can get at any health food store, and you can take anything from 5 micrograms to 1,000 micrograms. And because it has this complicated transport mechanism, you will meet your requirements. I take 500 mics daily because having had the B12 experience once, I don't want to have it again.
Is there sublingual?
No, there's no advantage to sublingual. You're take it anyway, as long as it's B12. Make sure that the label says the word cobalamin, okay? Cobalamin, C-O-B-A-L-A-M-I-N. It is a structural moiety in the true vitamin B12 molecule. And all of these pseudo B12s are missing cobalamin. And you can get in trouble taking those. If somebody says this is the magic plant food that actually has B12, make sure that somebody has identified cobalamin in there. Otherwise, you are eating a B12 analog, and the analog may compete with real B12 for the normal metabolism. B12 is not made by meat. And animals don't make B12.
Why are we deficient in it as vegans, then, is my question.
Because we have lost the adaptation to absorb the B12 that is made by our own intestinal bacteria. Okay? So that's why you have to take the stuff. And I'm sorry it's not a perfect world, but I'll tell you that a vegan diet is as close to being perfect as anything in this world. So don't quibble over the fact you can't get B12 from plants. Well, I'll do you a couple more recipes here. And this is one of my favorite recipes. This is kale and lots of other green stuff. And so sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, a little flaxseed, balsamic vinegar, some onions and garlic, give it a little flavor. And this is my vegetable smoothie. It's online at this location. It has Red Star yeast, so it meets the B12 requirement, and everything to the right of the RDA is more than 100%. And this is my fruit smoothie, which is probably my favorite of all foods. And it also meets the RDA for everything. It's just frozen strawberries and orange and seeds and so forth. And that's up online. Now, this is what I wanted to explain to you. There's a big advantage if you have digestive problems to buying a Vitamix blender. This is the only one I can recommend. This is a high-speed blender. When you're not using it in the kitchen, you can use it to mix concrete or maybe run your turret lathe. And the reason it's so important is, let's take this to be a macadamia nut here. It's actually a sphere, but we're pretending it's a macadamia. And we're going to break it into a whole bunch of different little parts. Well, when you do the math, it turns out the volume of the original macadamia nut is a function of the cube of the radius of the nut, whereas the area is a function of the square of the radius. And so when you do the math, it turns out if you break up this macadamia nut into 1,000 equal particles, you'll still have the same volume of macadamia nut, but you've increased the surface area by 10 times. If you break it into 1,000,000 particles, you've increased the surface area by 100 times, probably up to about 1 trillion by the time you run this thing through Vitamix. So you've increased your surface area 10,000 times. Who cares?
Absorption care.
Who cares? You almost had it. It's your enzyme. Your digestive enzymes cannot work on the inside of this macadamia nut. They can only work on the surface. So the more surface you can present to your digestive enzymes, the better shot they will have at getting through that nasty old fiber and getting at the nutrition that's on the inside. And that's why I think even a very expensive blender like a Vitamix is worth the trouble. Now let's see, amusing games you can play with parsley. How many people have watched meat eaters, when they get their steak, immediately put the parsley off on the side? That's the best part of the meal. They just threw it out. So the reason that parsley is so good is that it has the highest content per calorie of iron of any food. It's twice as much as the highest animal source iron, which is pork liver. Here's another expensive gadget, a Champion juicer. You don't have to have a Champion. There are a lot of good juicers. But here's a recipe with 100 grams of parsley. Who would ever think of eating 100 grams of parsley? That's a whole bunch of parsley. 200 grams of tomato, 230 grams of carrots, 85 grams of celery and little Red Star yeast here, here's the RDA arrow again, and you can see that all of the nutrients are well to the right of the arrow. And so if you can't afford a juicer, look for this stuff. It's the only thing that comes in a can in the United States of America that you can live on indefinitely, except that you need to put a little red star in it.
Doesn't the egg have a lot of salt in it?
Yeah, look for the low salt. We're going to be off on another topic in just a second, because salt happens to be another of my pet peeves. Well, how should I eat? Answer, so you have more than enough of all the essential nutrients and none of the saturated fats, processed plant foods, cholesterol, and autoimmunogenic animal proteins. There are two ways of looking at this. The first one is biblical, and I mention this for the benefit of those who are biblical. And there's the evolutionary side, and this is what the Bible says in Genesis 1:21. It's basically God is telling Adam and Eve to be vegetarians. And there is no mention here of baking, boiling, frying, roasting, no eggs, fish, meat, milk, beans, grains, oils, potatoes, or chicken McNuggets. And I used to think that was ridiculous nonsense. How can anybody live on the herbs of the field and the fruits of the trees? But I think that probably is the best advice that was ever given. The evolutionary side is that primates have only been around for 60 million years out of 500 million years. And the first primates were little shrew-like creatures. You see this one starting to climb up in a tree, and then it speciated, became ape-like, and finally turned into modern woman. Now, here's another picture of evolution. But our remote ancestors were large tree-living vegetarians, and our closest relatives are still vegetarians. There's a couple of Asian leaf monkeys and their kids. And there's a gorilla. The genetic difference between a human and a gorilla is 1.9%. A little physics over on the right side. Maybe I'll touch on that. So I made a graph of a primate diet, and what we find out is the heavier the animal, the heavier the primate, like a gorilla, is most likely to be a vegetarian. And the light animals are out in the tree branches chasing bugs. They're insectivores. So they get a lot of their calories from eating insects and whatever small creatures they can find running around in the trees. Say again?
What's a golden potato?
Golden potto, it's like a dwarf galago.
A galago?
Does that help you out? Or a bush baby. Those are all small primates. There's a tarsier. You probably recognize a tarsier. The genetic difference between us and a tarsier is 24%, whereas the difference between us and a chimp is 1.6%. And there are evolutionary selection pressures that had to do with our turning into the smartest cats on the planet. This little guy is a tarsier. He probably only weighs about 250 grams or so. And if he falls out of the tree, he's probably going to bounce and run back up in the tree, because the cross-sectional area of muscle and bone determines the amount of impact force that it can resist, and area is proportional to the square of the linear dimensions. Mass is proportional to the cube of linear dimensions. So if a gorilla or an elephant falls out of a tree, imagine the damage. And this is the way it shook out in the long run. The vegetarian primates had to move into the most dangerous part of the tree to find stuff to eat that wouldn't try to run away from, because kinetic energy is 1/2 mv squared, and one of these animals falls out of the tree, it's going to take whatever hit that it takes from the gravitational energy that it collected by going up at the top. To make a long story short, if you were going to eat bugs in the lower part of the tree, you didn't have much to worry about, because if you made a misstep, there wasn't far to fall, and you'd probably bounce anyway, and you were strong enough to take the hit. But if you were living up at the top and you fell out while you were munching on berries or fruit or leaves or whatever it was that you're after, impact was enough to put you in the hospital, and there weren't any hospitals. So you dropped out of evolution, and that's why the largest primates turned out to be the smartest ones. That's us, I think. Not always certain about that. And the little ones are still eating bugs. This is one of our ancestors, is referred to as Nutcracker Man. Seems to me he's a rather handsome specimen. Now the question is, were our ancestors really hunters? The usual story is, yeah, man was a hunter. Well, here's some anthropologists who are equally well qualified to say that man was the hunted. We got smart not by hunting, not by the social organization that we developed by learning how to track and kill other animals, but rather learning how to hide from the predators. Here's 5 fatty acids. This is linoleic acid. This is alpha-linolenic acid. These are the 2 essential fatty acids, the ones with the underlines. You have to have those in your diet. You do not have to have arachidonic acid in your diet, because linoleic acid, which I'm going to refer to from now on as La, so I won't have to do that tongue twister, and I'm going to refer to alpha-linolenic acid as ALA, because the La can make both the arachidonic acid, and in plants it also makes the ALA, but it can't do that in animals because we lack the enzymes to make that transformation. Now here are the ones that we really want to get at. This is eicosapentaenoic acid, or EPA, which is the famous ingredient in fish oil that prevents heart attacks. But the downside of that is, while it's reducing your chance of getting a clot in one of your coronary arteries, it's increasing your chance of having a hemorrhagic stroke up in the brain. So you're trading off one for another. And this is a difficult question to answer. I'm going to try to do it. How many people are taking DHA supplements? I'm experimenting with it. I haven't quite made up my mind. Infants who are not being breastfed have to have a formula that includes DHA, because DHA is a major player in both the retina and cell membranes up in the brain. So if you've raised your kid without adequate DHA, the IQ is about 7 points lower at 6 months of age, and they may have visual problems. But there are problems with algal DHA supplements. The first big problem is that there are very few clinical laboratories that can assay DHA. I'm a professional. I go to Kaiser Hospital in Honolulu, and I asked them to assay my DHA, and they didn't even know what it was. Say nothing of finding out. It took them 2 weeks to tell me that I would have to send a specimen out to the Mayo Clinic where they do it. So that's the first problem. The second problem with DHA is all the proprietary DHAs down here are made by the same company, Martek, and Martek uses a hexane solvent extraction process. I'm not too happy about that, although presumably they boil off all the hexane and get rid of it. So the other problem is that DHA retroconverts to some extent to EPA. Now, I had my own problem with omega-3. I took flaxseed for 8 or 9 years. About 3 years into it, I noticed that I was starting to bleed real easy. I get a hit on my skin, and my skin had turned purple. And I made a skydive one day. I tried to join up with 9 other guys, and as I was coming in to join up, my right arm hit the next guy's jumpsuit. And when I came down, all the skin had been taken off my right forearm. I was a bloody mess. I had to have somebody else pick up my parachute so I wouldn't get blood on it. I finally decided, hey, maybe there's something wrong with taking all that flaxseed. Maybe I'm getting too much ALA, because remember, ALA elongates to EPA. And EPA is the stuff that prevents blood clotting.
How much flaxseed were you taking?
I was taking about a teaspoon of flaxseed.
Daily?
Daily, yeah. Now, I'm not telling you not to take flaxseed, but I am telling you that if you take it and you start to notice this bleeding, you may want to back off a little bit because that's probably what happened. Well, when I started the DHA experiment about a month ago, I loaded up. I figured, well, I'm probably DHA deficient, so I'll take 5 capsules a day, and I did, and I started bleeding again. And I think it's because the DHA retroconverts to EPA, and I'm on a much more modest dose of. How did we get into this fix in the first place?
When you start taking 5 capsules a day, why were we worried about being deficient?
I just thought maybe I do some crazy things. That was one of them, okay? I don't mind using myself as a guinea pig, and frequently do. And I think that everyone else is entitled to be their own guinea pig too, but know what you're doing. And in this particular case, I didn't. If you've got ALA, if you're getting enough ALA, you're going to be able to elongate your own EPA. You're going to be able to elongate the EPA into DHA because you have the enzymes to do that. It just is that there is a certain amount of literature now suggesting that vegans don't have enough, they're not getting enough ALA and they're not making enough DHA, so they're DHA short. And there's a raging battle going on about this, which I will, well, actually, I'll show you. It's the people who are opposed to taking DHA supplements, Colin Campbell, Jeff Novick, that's John McDougall's nutritionist, Pam Popper, PhD, pretty good writer. The people who are in favor of it, Michael Greger, MD, Joel Furman, he's selling this stuff, and Jack Norris, who is a very competent registered dietitian and an ardent vegan. They're all suggesting we take DHA, and I'm somewhere in the middle here trying to decide. But before I recommend that anybody do take it or don't take it, I want to ask the question is, why is this a problem? Why do we have this problem? Well, reviewing that big book I showed you, it was pointed out that the dietary ratio of La to Allah in prehistoric times or pre-agricultural times was about 1 to 1. They were getting plenty of Allah, and the reason was that they were eating a lot of leafy green stuff, and if they were eating animals, the animals had been eating a lot of leafy green stuff because that's the way animals used to eat. And then came the Ag Revolution and everything changed. And in this man's opinion, it was the worst mistake in the history of the human race. He says agriculture was bad for health. Hunter-gatherers enjoyed a varied diet while early farmers obtained most of their food from one or a few starchy crops. So farmers gained cheap calories at the cost of poor nutrition. And then he points out that wheat, rice, and corn still provide the bulk of our calories. Secondly, the dependence on a limited number of crops ran the risk of famine and starvation. And finally, the agricultural revolution fueled a population explosion, and people got crowded into small, confined areas. They called them cities. We called it civilization. I'm still waiting for it to arrive, but animals are living in the crowded conditions that are currently generating our present hysteria over the swine flu. And you put a lot of animals together in one place, they become unhealthy, they start passing their bugs from animal to animal, the bugs mutate, and then they jump the species barrier into us. And this is a book that explains that in detail. It's called Beasts of the Earth. Sounds like it was written by a vegetarian, but it wasn't. These guys are by no means vegetarians. They're thoroughgoing scientists and they're MDs. And they trace almost all of the contagions of the human race back to our domesticated animals. Anthrax, brucellosis, let's see, influenza. The 1918 flu epidemic was a result of a virus that's carried in the GI tract of waterfowl. It causes no trouble to the ducks and the geese that have it. But when it gets into us, as it does when it mutates and jumps under crowded conditions, which we had in the trenches of World War I, then it goes like crazy. And right now we're dealing with the variety that jumped into pigs. At least half of all the contagious diseases that we have, we owe to our use of domesticated animals. Now, another problem with the ag revolution, which I really want to get to, is to put us dependent on grains. And here's the RDA arrow. And you can see that grains are deficient in vitamin. They have no vitamin C, while very little true vitamin A, short on vitamin E, calcium, folate, riboflavin. You'd do much better if you ate nothing but vegetables, because here's the RDA arrow for vegetables, and the only thing that are short in these 96 vegetables that I put into a Nutritionist 4 database is vitamin B12. We've already established that. Okay, we know that's not going to be there. But here's the difference. You get your total day's calories for $1.21 if you're eating nothing but grain. It's going to cost you about $11.55 if you're eating vegetables. They're much healthier, but the reason they're so expensive is that they spoil very fast. And grains, by contrast, do not spoil fast. You can store them for long periods of time in structures that look like this, silos. They can keep grain for 240 days. This lady is a victim of the agricultural revolution. She lived about 8,000 years ago. We see her here grinding grain down to the mash in order to make them edible. And she wound up with knee problems that showed up in her skeleton and bad spinal problems. And the archaeologists found her skeleton in the remains of a community which is called Horea. It's in the Middle East. But she was in this posture all the time because ever since we've dealt with grains, we've been having to pound them into a pulp before we could eat them, because you can't eat grains, right? Anybody ever try to eat raw grains? I'm waiting for somebody to say, soak them. Yeah, you soak them and you sprout them, and then you can eat them. But they're not grains anymore, they're baby vegetables. There's a very serious quote. 8,000 years ago, there were no grains, bread, or pasta. Your genes haven't changed for the past 100,000 years. Genetically, mankind has not evolved to eat grains and breads. And I pretty much agree with this, although that's probably the only thing Barry Sears ever said that I do agree with. Here's the number one thing to do with fat. Don't fry foods with it. Look what happens to this poor old innocent potato here. It's got 220 calories. Then you cut it into strips and you fry it, and it's got 632 calories. And you make potato chips out of it, and it's got 1,000 calories. So if you want to get fat in a hurry, just fry everything. Well, now this is the key point. The worst thing about oils is that they're almost, well, first of all, they're 100% fat. They've had all the fiber, everything that might have been in them has been taken out. And they're mostly linoleic acid. Here's safflower oil here. The ratio of La to Allah is 746, which means that safflower oil's got virtually no Allah. And Allah is the stuff you need. That's the original omega-3 fatty acid. Corn oil is 46. This is canola oil, which has got a good rep in most vegetarian circles, but its ratio is 13. And the only one that really starts to look good is olive oil. I guess I have to give a green light to olive oil reluctantly, but it's got about a 5,000-year clear track record. And then the grand champ for Allah is flax, and its ratio is 0.23, so it means it's got over 4 times as much Allah as La. So if you're going to eat any oil, make sure it's flax. Now this is what's wrong with basing our entire agriculture on grains. It means that the foods that we eat and the animals that the non-vegetarians eat are going to be stuffed full of linoleic acid because the grains are all full of linoleic acid. Linoleic acid can be converted to ALA by the plant because the plant has the necessary enzyme to do that, but we lack that enzyme, and what happens is that We make a whole lot of this stuff from the linoleic acid that we eat. That's arachidonic acid, and it is responsible for what's called the arachidonic acid cascade, which causes the formation of all these inflammatory eicosanoids over here on the right. These are the 5 pillars of inflammation: heat, redness, swelling, pain, loss of function. And we got plenty of that. We got plenty of that to burn. There are good reasons for having an inflammatory process. It's the way that your immune system puts you back together after an accident has occurred. But it's not good to have an overactive inflammatory system, which is what you're generating when you eat a whole bunch of linoleic acid and not enough ALA. Now, as vegetarians, we can congratulate ourselves that we're not taking very much arachidonic acid, which is the stuff that starts that arachidonic cascade. Here are the animal foods sorted in my USDA SR 21. Fish oil comes in first. This is 1.75 grams per 100 grams. The highest plant food, by contrast, is cloves at 0.04 grams. So there's about a 30-fold difference between animal food and plant food. Cloves only came in at a number 1158 animal foods in the USDA SR 21. Everybody get that? This is ALA minus WA, and it's sorted. All the numbers over in this row are positive, even though some of them are decimal. But obviously, number 1 is flaxseed oil, number 2 is flaxseed, number 3 is chia seeds, and then oregano. I don't know anybody that can eat 2,200 calories of oregano. So I think we have to pretty much limit the big-time ALA sources to flaxseed and chia seed. Anybody ever tried chia seed? Okay, you can stick that in your blender and make a good smoothie. I think I better quit there, and I'm probably way over, aren't I, Dixie? Thank you. My pleasure. And you've been a terrific audience. Thanks so much.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.